cranes. These were not symbols that Mao and the communists were eager to draw on because of their association with the imperial past. They wanted to vanquish all of the class differences that had marked China over the past several thousand years, and they wanted to prove that communism was the best path to move forward. So they sought to establish a clean break with the past. Mao and the Communist Party, they needed to find a new animal that could be something of a blank slate, but also be uniquely associated with China. So pandas during that era could be summoned as a symbol because they didn't have a long association in Chinese history or in Chinese culture. They were still a relatively recent phenomenon as far as being popular. They were innocuous, they were non-threatening, and they were the perfect symbol for the new China.
The Cold War was about who was going to be establishing the world order after World War II. Was it going to be the democratic nations of the world, or was it going to be communism? During the period of the Cold War, China did use panda diplomacy to reward its communist friends, such as the Soviet Union and North Korea. They did not send pandas to the democratic nations of the world.
By the early 1950s, none of the zoos in the United States were able to obtain new pandas to replace those had died.
This included Panda and Pandi, whom you might recall were China's first gift to the United States under Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist regime. Pandi died in 1945, just as World War II ended. And Panda, who was later renamed Susie, died in 1951. Pandas are only found within China because their natural habitat is limited to the forested mountains of southwestern China. Since they could not be found elsewhere, zoos in the West grew quite desperate.
There was an incident in the mid-1960s that showed just how desperate Western zoos were to obtain more pandas. The two zoos in the world outside of China that had pandas were in London and in Moscow.
The London Zoo had Cici. She was sold for a handsome sum to the zoo by an Austrian animal broker who had the means to acquire rare animals from all around the world. While the Moscow Zoo had An. If you recall, he was one of a pair of pandas who was gifted to the Soviet Union by China, as they were socialist allies. Sadly, the other one passed on, leaving him without a mate.
Well, by that point, the Sino-Soviet split happened in 1960, so the two sides weren't talking to each other. Like, the Moscow Zoo couldn't go to China and ask for more pandas.
It all started with this man, Nikita Khrushchev. He took over as leader of the Soviet Union in 1953, and he wanted to normalize ties with the West. But not Chairman Mao, who also felt that Khrushchev's other reforms were ideological blasphemy. And it was this split that created one of the most interesting chapters of Pandamania.
The London Zoo had a female panda named Gigi, and the Moscow Zoo had a male panda.
You see where this is going, right?
Even though the two were on opposite sides of the Cold War, they would need to bridge their Cold War ideological differences and work with each other to discuss the possibility of breeding their two pandas.
In 1966, after 18 months of intense discussions, Cici from the London Zoo flew to the Soviet Union to meet An in the Moscow Zoo.
Unfortunately, the two sides did not get along.
She meant the pandas, not the countries.
One panda attacked the other. They weren't actually interested in each other in any sort of romantic sense, but this very short-lived attempt to bridge Cold War differences does show the possibilities that were inherent in these panda relationships around the world.
Titi never mated nor produced cubs for the West. Just as the West was running out of options,
in 1972, China and the United States managed to break the deep ice which separated China and the United States for decades.
In 1972, then U.S. President Richard Nixon visited China. He was the first U.S. president to ever do so, all in a bid to normalize relations between the two countries.
As part of the important initiative, China and the United States agreed that China would dispatch pandas to the United States, to Washington, D.C. Zoo, actually.
Meet Ling Ling and Sing Sing, the first pair of pandas gifted to a democratic country by the People's Republic of China.
I think pandemonium is going to break out right here at the zoo.
For the People's Republic of China to send over two of its most precious national treasures to a country that only a few years before it had been openly feuding with. This was showing that the two countries weren't going to have a short-lived relationship.
The Chinese government did do a lot of media report about sending the giant panda to the United States. It was such a joyful, happy occasion. It brought happiness and great joy to the Chinese people and the American people.
China in 1972 was a very, very depressed nation. The economy was in a shambles. America was a rich, powerful nation with economic resources, and the Chinese, I think, could see forward that if they improved the relationship with Washington, other democratic nations would follow. Moreover, Mao was worried that the Soviet Union might attack. The Soviet Union put massive numbers of tactical nuclear weapons along the border, and if the Soviet Union attacked, Mao would need a friend. So Mao had powerful reasons to choose the United States as the nation in the West to begin the normalization.
So, from this point on, who got pandas from China looked very different. In 1972, Japan. In 1973, France. 1974, Britain and Germany. 1975, Mexico. 1978, Spain.
This is not a disparate set of countries. They are basically countries that the PRC believed were reliably anti-Soviet, who could help to provide a bulwark against Soviet pressures. It really allowed them to have a lot of space, and that space also afforded the PRC the ability to have someone like Deng Xiaoping come up and do opening and reform. He had a very difficult situation to contend with. It's not just the poverty. Social trust had broken down. You had a situation where the Chinese Communist Party was also tearing itself apart. What are you going to tell the Chinese population to say you have to keep supporting us? You should not resist.
The region is seizing more synthetic drugs than ever before.
Son grupos armados que ellos son los que mandan en la zona.
No espera ser capturado o muerto en desarrollo de operaciones militares.
The main producer is Colombia. Target number one is Europe.
The purest cocaine you find the customer right now. We've seen the opioid epidemic explode in this community.
Her whole hand is, this is all big.
Smugglers have modified their vehicles to conceal drugs. मंशियात के अड्डे पे रेड कर रहे हैं, फौरी तौर पे हमारे पीछे आओ। पहला गोली मारूंगा। और ये देखें कि जो है ना जानवरों को दिया जाता है।
Hey, knife out, knife out.
2 milligrams is more than enough to kill them.
We're executing a misuse of drugs act search warrant.
Addicted, premiering 24th May on CNA.
Thousands of people believed to be illegals from Rwanda were expelled by the M23 from the key major town of Goma on Saturday. On On Monday, the M23 spokesperson Willy Ngoma presented 181 individuals claiming they were Rwandan subjects who were illegally in Goma. Also present were thousands of women and children believed to be family members of the culprits. According to witnesses, they were carried in trucks and their documents issued by the Congolese authorities were burned to ashes in the stadium. The group claimed that the documents were bogus. Located in North Kivu, which had been under the control of the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, also known as FDLR, both Kigali and M23 accused the Congo government of supporting the FDLR, which has also committed numerous atrocities in the region. According to some sources, most families lived in a displacement camp in Sake, a few kilometers from Goma. Some 360 people were repatriated on Saturday into Rwanda, according to Eugene Byun, a spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR.
Global food insecurity and malnutrition continue to worsen in 2024. Global food insecurity and malnutrition continue to worsen in 2024, with 295 million people suffering from acute hunger across 53 countries. That's according to a new report from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and its partners. The new figures represent an increase of 13.7 million compared to 2023. It marks the sixth consecutive annual rise in acute food insecurity in the world's most fragile regions. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the figures are another unflinching indictment of a world dangerously off course. While acute food insecurity typically stems from a combination of factors, the report emphasizes that conflicts remain the main driver in many of the worst-hit regions. Some populations face conditions beyond acute hunger. Famine was confirmed in parts of Sudan in 2024, while catastrophic levels of food insecurity were recorded in the Gaza Strip, South Sudan, Haiti, and Mali. At times snatching phones, mugging people, and battering police. But now several young men living in one of Africa's largest slums have turned their backs on the gangster life to become farmers, a change triggered after their loved ones died at the hands of gang violence.
We were many boys here, which we have grown with them here. They start engaging them in bad things like robbery, stealing people's phone.
The types of crimes I was involved in were going and mugging people, We'll go in gangs like 4 people and go and hide some in some hotspots area.
Now several of the men are part of Vision DRS, founded back in 2017 to address food insecurity in one of Kenya's poorest communities.
Okay, our mission is to reduce crime. Yes, first is our aim, because Madare, sometimes you find there is chaos, but when you are busy, let's say when youths are busy, they cannot engage in crime. That's why we decided to do something.
The initiative is putting food on the table at lunch for over 150 children each week. The produce comes from its urban farm tucked away in the muddy streets that make up Matare's slums. Authorities here say poverty pushes young people to crime.
One of the major challenges affecting young people in slums is, gangs and, the lure of, making it rich or getting, quick buck. And that is mostly because of the environment that exists. We have not done enough to provide opportunities for these young people. The question is, for young people coming from high schools, young people leaving primary school, what is there for them? What is there for them mostly is bleak. And a lot of them end up joining these gangs who then provide opportunity either for them to become a man, for them to earn a living, and it's so luring.
Some 2 million people, or 60% of Nairobi's population, are estimated to live in informal settlements like this one. described as a serious threat to peace in Ethiopia. After being stripped of its legal status as a political party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front is now appealing for intervention from the African Union. The ban on the party's activities come after its members refused to organize a general assembly. The TPLF, which was at the helm in Ethiopia from 1991 to 2018, has been plagued by internal conflicts. Relations with Abiy Ahmed's government have also been strained. The party says the ban puts the 2022 peace deal that ended 2 years of conflict in the northern Tigray region at risk. It was in November of that year that members of the TPLF inked a pact with representatives of the federal government to put an end to fighting in the region. The 2 years of conflict had seen federal Ethiopian forces, supported by local militias and the Eritrean army, pitted against TPLF rebels. Tens of thousands of people were killed, while millions were forced from their homes. Assassination attempt just days ago, Balassi Bouti is now facing another threat to his life. The leader of Congo's opposition party and the candidate in next year's presidential election was abducted last Sunday in Brazzaville by armed and masked men. His party blames the government. We are convinced that Brazzaville's dictatorial regime is behind this. It's not the first time. He's been arrested before. And the people who came to his house used a car without a number plate, unmasked and armed. That's why we believe it's a kidnapping this time round. We plan to continue mobilizing ourselves, not just among the socialists, but across Congo and the diaspora. Opposition parties issued a joint statement on Thursday condemning the kidnapping and demanding Bouti's unconditional release. This cowardly act is part of a worrying escalation of terror, intimidation, and systematic human rights violations in the Republic of Congo. It's a serious breach of personal freedom and a direct violation of Article 9 of the Constitution. We demand Lassie Bouti's immediate release.
Nous exigeons la libération immédiate de Lassie Bouti.
Congo's Human Rights Organization has issued an urgent appeal for intervention from diplomats and international bodies. The government has yet to respond to the accusations.
Former Prime Minister and opposition leader Succès Masra was arrested early on Friday morning at his home in Gassi, a district of the capital N'Djamena. Surveillance footage shows the leader of the Transformers Party being taken away by a squad of armed men. He's been accused of inciting hatred in connection with deadly clashes in the southwest of the country. His party said he'd been kidnapped and are demanding his unconditional release.
Des éléments en treillis militaires, lourdement armés.
Heavily armed men in military fatigues broke into the residence and proceeded to abduct the president of the Transformers Party, who's also a former Prime Minister, Dr. Assiongar Succès Masra. The Transformers, a party that has always advocated peaceful civic engagement, wishes to express its deep concern over this brutal action carried out outside of any known legal procedure and in blatant violation of civil and political rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Later in the day, a public prosecutor explained why Masra, a fierce critic of President Mohamed Déby, had been arrested. You may recall that following the attack that took place on the 14th of May in Mandiago, a village some 18 kilometers from Bainanmar in the province of Le Gon Occidental, investigations conducted by the judicial police revealed the involvement of Mr. Assiongar Succès Masra. His alleged involvement incited the population against a community living in the area. Messages were circulated, particularly on social media, calling on people to arm themselves against fellow citizens. Wednesday's violent clashes are believed to have been triggered by a land dispute between herders and local communities. At least 41 people were killed and more than 80 others have been detained. For now, Masra, who came second in last year's elections, is calling on his supporters to remain calm.
Group of 59 white South Africans arrived in the US, where they've been granted refugee status. President Trump says the refugee applications were expedited because the people concerned were victims of racial discrimination, something South Africa's government denies. The Afrikaners are descended from Dutch settlers who arrived 4 centuries ago to South Africa and who led the government which brought in apartheid, a racially segregated political system which has led to discrimination against black South Africans, and it's no longer in force. Well, usually it takes years for the US government to process refugee applications, but this group waited only 3 months. Well, our North America correspondent Nomia Iqbal has been speaking to one of those who made the journey.
If you're white, you're wrong in South Africa. You're a land thief, you are a racist. The whole time it's being told, and there is racist white people, plenty of them.
You say you're not a racist white person?
No, not at all. I've got many black friends. I think I've got more African black men as friends, as white friends. I'm tired of being told, just because I'm white, I'm a thief. Just because I'm white, I'm wrong in this. I had nothing to do with apartheid. Nothing.
Is there anything specific that's happened, Charles, that made you think, I've got to get out of here? I've got to leave?
After the death rates and stuff and my machinery being cut up, and I'm still, after reporting everything to the police, not getting any protection or anything like that, the only thing that's left on my farm is a sign that says mining area. All the fences has been taken off, boom gates has been broken off.
There are voices out there, including the South African president, who has called you cowards.
Yeah.
You've got other Afrikaners who are saying that you're not refugees, you're opportunists, that you've abandoned the country. What would you say to those people?
I had to leave a 5-bedroom house, which I will lose now because I'm not going to pay for it, behind, my car behind, my dogs behind, my mother behind. It is not, I didn't come here for fun, but my children are safe.
What was it like when you got off the shuttle bus and came into that hangar and were greeted by the Trump administration?
It was overwhelming. I didn't expect that because I thought we're going to be in a shuttle bus, taken somewhere, and we must start working. All of us that is there, we know we're going to start here from the bottom because we are the new people here. We're going to start from the bottom.
Do you ever worry that you might be caught up in some big political game here? That you're a pawn somehow?
Yeah, it's a scary thing, but people mustn't think we're just taking advantage of this. We're coming here to make a contribution to the country.
Old tweets of yours have been dug up in which you appear to have made anti-Semitic comments, and so people are questioning, should you be here? What would you say to that?
I would like them...
What would you like to clarify?
I've deleted the comment. But I was actually thinking I should have not deleted it. If you go look where I commented on, it was Passover, the Orthodox Jews, and I'm Christian, were spitting and screaming and bumping Christians walking with the cross. For me as a Christian, that is not acceptable. In Israel, and I went and I said something on Twitter, which I copy and pasted from somebody else's page, because if you go read my post, you'll see it's not the way I write.
So you had quoted someone else. I mean, the quotes...
I copied and pasted it.
The quotes were anti-Semitic. Yeah. They said Jews are dangerous people, they're untrustworthy, they're not God's chosen people.
I was super angry too.
So you did it out of anger?
Yeah. And I was in hospital at that point of time. I was on morphine. But that's not an excuse. I'm not trying to make an excuse. Even now, if I would see any person going against my religion, I will speak up against it.
You have high hopes being here in America. Is there a part of you that is anxious that it might not work out?
No, to be honest with you, because of my belief, I believe this is God's plan for me.
These
p.m. Thanks for staying on. Most Afrikaner communities say they will not take up the U.S. President Donald Trump's resettlement offer. The Trump administration has been criticized for granting refugee status to Afrikaners over people fleeing war and famine. For more on this, we're joined now by Dr. Theo Diaga, chair of the Agri-SA Initiative and former president of the World Farmers Organization, who is joining us online. Good to have you, Dr. Diaga, and thank you very much for your time. Let me start firstly by the view that is held by the South African government on this resettlement of Afrikaners, at least the 49 that have left. The South African government maintaining that this is a political move that is guised as some kind of refugee seeking status, saying the South African police statistics on farm-related crimes do not support allegations of violent crime targeted at farmers generally or particularly any race. There is rather sufficient structures available within South Africa to address these concerns of discrimination. Now, from the point of view of, I suppose, the many hats that you wear, previously being with the World Agricultural Organization, you are now the chair of the Southern African Agri Initiative, but also with Agri All Africa. What is the view within the continent of this political conflict that is going on in South Africa around this matter of these farmers? Okay, we seem to have lost Dr. Diaga. They will try and make a connection with him again and continue with this for now. U.S. National Security Law and Foreign Relations expert Johanna LeBlanc says South Africa and the United States must find ways of engaging better with one another as their relationship is mutually beneficial.
I believe President Ramaphosa will be the first African president to sit down and have a conversation with Mr. Trump since he has taken office. So this is a bit historic and unprecedented. But even more so, I think that South Africa and the U.S. Are partners on various initiatives. The United States has a number of American businesses that engage in commercial affairs in South Africa. So the United States has a great deal of interest about what's happening in South Africa. And South Africa also has a great deal of interest in maintaining a good relationship with the United States, but one that is based on mutual respect and respect for South Africa's sovereignty and certainly South Africa's rule of law. But I think it's also important to note that there are other issues that has to be discussed between the United States and South Africa because the relationship has been strained since Mr. Trump took office, and even before Mr. Trump took office, even under President Biden's presidency. You have the issue of Iran. You have the issue of the U.S.'s support for Israel and the ICJ court case against Israel for genocide against Palestine. So there are a lot of policies that the United States and South Africa do not agree on that must be discussed in order to move forward with progressive and productive diplomatic relations.
LeBlanc has also noted the lack of reports by international human rights groups about the so-called genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa.
As you know, President Ramaphosa has made it very clear that there is no such issue of genocide against white South Afrikaners in South Africa, which is expected because most governments usually deny claims of genocide or claims of discrimination. But there's another part that we're not discussing is that normally when such things occur, you have reports by the United Nations, right? You have reports by major international human rights groups. And in this case, we have not seen any reports, any credible reports from any other organizations saying that there is indeed a genocide against white South Afrikaners in South Africa, for the exception of the United States saying so. So there seems to be some level of discrepancy in terms of what's happening in South Africa versus the perception of what is happening here, of what is actually taking place by decision makers here in Washington. and it's rather concerning, and it's something that's going to take a great deal of continuous diplomatic discussions to come up with an actual agreement of what is really happening in South Africa.
Right, we seem to have Dr. Diaghe back with us on the line. Dr. Diaghe, you can hear me. I was saying just moments ago that there is, of course, this resettlement of 49 Afrikaners that has sparked a lot of debate in South Africa and I suppose elsewhere. From the point of view of farmers that you interact with, they get a 40-strong delegation from, for example, from the Agri All Africa at Nampo. What is their feeling about this resettlement of Afrikaners in the United States? Are we going to see farmers going in their numbers?
I don't think so. Not not yet, at least. We don't know who these Afrikaners are who left. We were not part of organizing them. We don't know what criteria they had to meet. We do have a list inside in our organization of people who inquired about the opportunity of about 1,000, but only 2 of them are real farmers. There are 3 categories on that list. There are quite a number of youngsters. Those are people who work in the United States every year. They drive big machines, they do harvesting on farms, but it's for a few months every year, and this year there will be 16,200 of them who will be going. And those who want to take up the offer of the USA government, they feel that they have better opportunities there than here. They would not have gone there if they had similar opportunities here. They feel they understand the system there.
Yeah.
Then the second largest group is actually middle-aged people who worked elsewhere in the value chain, a silo manager or a floor manager at a cooperative or a farm manager. The level where BEE is quite acute at the moment, and they say they cannot find a job again. Some of them have struggled for 4 or 5 years to find a new job, and they don't have a livelihood. They cannot take care of their families, and they believe they will be better off on that side. And then there's also a small group of trauma-stricken people who are on that list, people who fell victim to farm attacks or farm murders. And none of them have heard anything back from either the embassy or the Department of Foreign Affairs in the USA, and none of them know exactly what will be awaiting them. You know, what's on offer. Will they stay in tents? Will they get a green card? Whatever it is.
So what you're saying, Dr. Diaghe, is that from your list, at least of 1,000 or so that you have looked at, those 49 are not represented in that particular list. However, be it, they did get this particular status. And the issue really at hand is, what is the feeling of your grouping as Agri-SA Initiative on this disinformation at 2 levels? One, that there is white genocide or African